My name is Paige, and I'm 35 years old. I stood frozen on stage at my mother's charity gala, the microphone still warm in my hand as she smiled coldly at me in front of 300 wealthy donors. "You're not even a doormat," she said. "People actually notice when they step on those." As gasps rippled through the crowd, something inside me finally broke free. Years of seeking approval shattered in an instant, replaced by a crystal clarity I'd never known before. What happened next would change everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Trust me, what I'm about to share might just give you the courage to do the same. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in Boston, in a sprawling colonial home with perfectly manicured lawns and a view of the Charles River. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect family, successful, charitable, respected. My father, Thomas Wilson, was a prominent investment banker who spent more time at the office than at home. My mother, Diana Wilson, was a socialite known throughout the city for her charitable endeavors and impeccable taste. And then there was my older brother, Ryan, the golden child who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. But behind closed doors, our family dynamics were vastly different from the image we projected. My earliest memory is of my mother's disapproval. I was 5 years old, and I had drawn a picture of our family. When I proudly showed it to her, expecting praise, she merely glanced at it and said, "The proportions are all wrong, Paige. If you're going to do something, at least do it properly." She then hung Ryan's math test with a perfect score on the refrigerator where my artwork should have been. This set the tone for our relationship. No matter what I achieved, it was never quite good enough for Diana Wilson. When I brought home straight A's, she would ask why I wasn't in more advanced classes like Ryan. When I won second place in the state piano competition at age 12, she wondered aloud why I couldn't have won first. When I was accepted to Harvard for my undergraduate degree, she remarked that it was easier for girls to get in these days because of diversity quotas. My father was rarely present both physically and emotionally. When he was home, he seemed uncomfortable with confrontation and would retreat to his study at the first sign of tension. "That's just how your mother is," he would tell me when I came to him in tears after particularly harsh criticism. "She wants the best for you." But what I heard was, "Your feelings don't matter enough for me to intervene." Ryan, 3 years my senior, wasn't deliberately cruel, but he absorbed our mother's values like a sponge. He learned early on that achievement and perfection were the currency of her affection, and he excelled accordingly. Harvard undergraduate, followed by Harvard Business School, followed by a prestigious position at our father's firm. Each accomplishment was celebrated lavishly, while mine were acknowledged with perfunctory nods. I tried everything to gain my mother's approval. I joined the debate team because she valued articulate speech. I took up tennis because she believed it was a proper sport for a young lady of our social standing. I volunteered at her favorite charities, hoping she would notice my dedication. But the goalposts kept moving, and her approval remained just out of reach. By the time I was 18, I had internalized the message that I was somehow fundamentally flawed. Not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not accomplished enough to deserve my mother's love. So I decided to pursue the one thing I knew she respected: success. If I couldn't win her love through being, perhaps I could win it through doing. I followed Ryan to Harvard not because I particularly wanted to study business, but because I knew it would be the first step toward the kind of success my mother might finally acknowledge. I graduated with honors, went on to Harvard Business School, and threw myself into building a career that even Diana Wilson couldn't dismiss. Throughout all of this, my mother continued her charitable work, founding a nonprofit called Freedom Builders that focused on creating housing and employment opportunities for underprivileged women. The irony wasn't lost on me that she could show such compassion to strangers while treating her own daughter with cold disdain. But that was Diana Wilson, warm and charming in public, cold and critical in private. What no one knew, not my father, not Ryan, and certainly not my mother, was that as I built my own success, I began anonymously funding her charitable foundation. It started small with the donation of $50,000 when I received my first significant bonus. I told myself it was because I believed in the cause, but deep down I knew I was still trying to earn her love, even if she didn't know I was the one supporting her work. After business school, I moved to New York to put some physical distance between myself and my family, but the emotional tethers remained strong. While my classmates went to work for established investment firms, I took a risk and started my own venture capital company, focusing exclusively on women led businesses. I saw too many brilliant female entrepreneurs being overlooked by male dominated investment committees, and I wanted to change that dynamic. My first big success came when I invested in a female founded tech company that revolutionized online security protocols. When the company was acquired by Google 2 years later, my initial investment multiplied 30 times over. Suddenly, at 27, I was a millionaire in my own right. More successes followed as I developed a reputation for having an uncanny ability to spot female led businesses with massive potential. By 30, I was managing a portfolio worth over $100 million and had been featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30. I bought a sleek penthouse apartment in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, drove a Tesla, and traveled first class. On paper, I had everything. But approval from my mother remained elusive. When the Forbes article came out, she called to tell me I should have worn a different outfit for the photo shoot. When I invited my parents to see my new apartment, she spent the entire visit pointing out what she would have done differently with the decor. Success, it seemed, was not enough to bridge the gap between us. Around this time, I heard through family connections that my mother's foundation, Freedom Builders, was struggling financially. Several major donors had pulled out during the economic downturn, and they were at risk of having to scale back their program significantly. Without allowing myself to examine my motivations too closely, I set up a shell company and made an anonymous donation of $1 million to the foundation. The money came with a condition that it be used to expand their job training program for women re-entering the workforce after incarceration or abuse. This program was particularly effective, with an 87% success rate in placing women in stable, well-paying jobs. I believed in the work, even if I had complicated feelings about the woman running it. My mother never suspected I was the donor. In fact, at the next family dinner, she boasted about her mysterious benefactor and speculated that it might be a tech billionaire with a guilty conscience. I sat silently, picking at my food, simultaneously pleased that I had helped the foundation and hurt that my mother still couldn't see my worth. Over the next few years, my anonymous support of Freedom Builders grew. I purchased the building where they had their headquarters when the lease was about to expire and offered them a 99-year lease at $1 per year. I funded the opening of 3 new centers in different cities. I established scholarship programs in my shell company's name for the children of women served by the foundation. All the while, I continued to attend family events where my mother would criticize my choice of career, my appearance, my apartment, my lack of a husband. "Successful women intimidate men, Paige," she would say with a sigh. "That's why you're still single." I would smile tightly and change the subject, never revealing that I was now the primary financial support for her beloved charity. My relationship with my father deteriorated during this time as well. As I grew more successful, I had hoped he might finally stand up to my mother on my behalf, but he remained as passive as ever. "That's just how she is," he would still say now, with a hint of resignation in his voice. I realized he had made his choice long ago. Peace at any price, even if that price was his daughter's self-worth. The one bright spot in my life was my friendship with my assistant Jessica. Unlike my family, Jessica saw me clearly, my strengths and weaknesses, my generosity, and my blind spots. She had started as my executive assistant 5 years earlier and had become something between a sister and a best friend. She was the only person who knew about my anonymous support of Freedom Builders, and she was increasingly vocal about her concerns. "You're enabling her, Paige," she would say during our late-night strategy sessions. "You're pouring millions into her foundation, and she still treats you like you're nothing. When does it end?" I didn't have an answer for her. The truth was, some part of me still believed that if I just achieved enough, gave enough, proved my worth, clearly enough, my mother would finally see me. It was a child's fantasy, but one I couldn't seem to let go of. By the time I was 35, I had secretly become the financial backbone of Freedom Builders. Through various channels, my contributions accounted for nearly 60% of their annual operating budget. I had helped them expand to 7 cities, serve thousands of women, and gain national recognition for their work. It should have been enough. But with Diana Wilson, nothing ever was. The annual Freedom Builders Charity Gala was the highlight of the Boston social calendar. Each year, my mother would spend months planning every detail from the menu to the floral arrangements to the seating chart. 300 of Boston's wealthiest and most influential citizens would gather in the ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel, dressed in their finest to support the foundation. And more importantly, in my mother's eyes, to see and be seen. 2 months before this year's gala, I received the usual formal invitation addressed to Ms. Paige Wilson and guest, as if I were any other donor and not the daughter of the foundation's president. I called my mother to RSVP, expecting the usual brief business-like conversation. "Will you be bringing anyone this year?" she asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "No, just me," I replied, ignoring the implied criticism. "Well, I suppose that's for the best. The seating chart is already complicated enough." There was a pause. "We've asked the governor to speak this year and Senator Collins. No speaking role for you this time, I'm afraid." It was the "this time" that caught my attention. I had never been asked to speak at the gala before, despite my business success and philanthropic work. I was always just Diana Wilson's disappointing daughter, seated at a table far from the stage. "That's fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm happy to support from the audience." After we hung up, I received an email from Jessica. She had been doing some financial research at my request and had uncovered something significant. Freedom Builders had experienced a cash flow crisis earlier in the year that they had kept quiet. My recent anonymous donation of $2 million had quite literally saved them from bankruptcy. Without my support, the foundation would have had to close its doors within months. This knowledge sat uneasily with me as the gala approached. I had the power to bring my mother's charitable empire crashing down around her, yet she continued to treat me with casual disdain. Jessica became increasingly vocal about her concerns. "You need to stop enabling her toxic behavior," she insisted during one of our regular lunch meetings. "You're successful, generous, and brilliant, and she treats you like you're nothing. It's not healthy, Paige." I knew she was right, but decades of conditioning are hard to overcome. "After the gala," I promised her. "I'll start withdrawing my support after the gala, gradually, so the women who depend on the foundation aren't hurt." Jessica looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll hold you to that." For the gala, I splurged on a custom-made gown from a female designer whose business I had helped fund. It was a deep emerald green that complemented my auburn hair and fair skin, with a subtle shimmer that caught the light when I moved. For once, I wanted to feel confident in my own skin, regardless of what my mother might say. I arrived at the Fairmont early, offering to help with last-minute preparations. My mother was in the ballroom directing staff with military precision as they arranged centerpieces and place cards. She barely glanced at me when I approached. "Oh, Paige, you're here. That dress is rather eye-catching, isn't it?" Her tone made it clear this wasn't a compliment. "I like it," I said, simply refusing to be drawn into her game. "What can I help with?" She assigned me the task of checking place cards, effectively keeping me busy and out of sight until the guests arrived. As I worked, I overheard her speaking to a major donor, a tech CEO whose company had recently gone public. "We've been so blessed this year," she was saying. "An anonymous donor has been incredibly generous. I suspect it might be someone like yourself, someone who truly understands the value of our work." I felt a familiar twist in my stomach. She was taking credit for the foundation's success, while simultaneously dismissing the possibility that her own daughter could be capable of such generosity. As guests began to arrive, I mingled, professionally speaking, with many of the influential donors I knew from my own business circles. Several expressed admiration for my work in venture capital, and I found myself relaxing slightly in the warm glow of their respect. Then, just 30 minutes before the program was to begin, the event coordinator approached me with a panicked expression. "Ms. Wilson, we need your help. The governor's office just called. He's stuck in traffic and will be at least an hour late. We need someone to introduce your mother to start the program. Would you be willing to step in?" Before I could respond, my mother appeared at my elbow. "Paige can handle that," she said smoothly. "She's not much of a public speaker, but she'll do in a pinch." The coordinator looked uncomfortable but handed me a sheet of paper with talking points. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. You'll be the third person on stage right after the welcome from the board chairman and the foundation video. As she hurried away, my mother turned to me with a tight smile. Try not to ramble, Paige. Keep it brief and professional. Then she was gone, moving through the crowd like the queen she imagined herself to be. Ryan found me a few minutes later, his wife Laura by his side. Unlike my brother Laura, had always been kind to me, perhaps because she too had experienced Diana Wilson's subtle cruelty as an outsider to the family. Heard you got roped into speaking, Ryan said, sipping his champagne. Be careful up there. Mom's in one of her moods tonight. When isn't she? I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Laura squeezed my arm sympathetically. You look beautiful, Paige. That color is perfect on you. I thanked her, grateful for the simple kindness. As they moved away to find their table, I felt a familiar knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Public speaking had never bothered me in business settings, but something about doing it in front of my mother made me feel like an insecure child again. The ballroom filled quickly, a sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits. The lighting was deliberately flattering, the music tastefully understated. Everything was perfect, just as my mother demanded. I took my assigned seat at a table near the front, noticing that I was seated with strangers rather than family members. Another small slight that would have once hurt, but now just felt tiredly predictable. As the lights dimmed for the foundation video, I mentally rehearsed my introduction. I would be professional and warm, focusing on the good work of Freedom Builders, rather than my complicated relationship with its founder. I would rise above the pettiness, as I always tried to do. What I didn't know was that in just a few minutes, everything would change. The ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza was a vision in gold and white, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the 300 guests in their formal attire. The stage was framed by elegant floral arrangements, white lilies and roses, my mother's signature flowers. A large screen displayed the Freedom Builders logo, a stylized image of a woman holding up a house. After the foundation video, which showcased the stories of women whose lives had been transformed by Freedom Builders programs, the board chairman introduced me with polite enthusiasm. And now to introduce our founder and president, her daughter, Ms. Paige Wilson. I walked to the stage with measured steps, conscious of 300 pairs of eyes following my movement. The emerald dress caught the light as I moved, giving me a moment of confidence despite my nerves. I took my place at the podium, adjusted the microphone, and smiled at the audience. Good evening, everyone, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It is my privilege tonight to introduce a woman whose vision and dedication have changed the lives of thousands of women across this country. Through Freedom Builders, she has created opportunities for women facing some of life's most difficult challenges: homelessness, domestic violence, incarceration, to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. I continued highlighting the Foundation's achievements over the past year, including the opening of 2 new centers and the expansion of the job training program, all made possible by my anonymous donations, though no one in the room knew that. The work of Freedom Builders is built on a simple but powerful belief that every woman deserves the chance to create a life of safety, stability, and fulfillment. No one embodies this mission more completely than our founder, my mother, Diana Wilson. The applause was enthusiastic as my mother rose from her seat and made her way to the stage. She was impeccably dressed in a midnight blue gown that had undoubtedly cost thousands, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. She embraced me briefly as we passed a public show of affection that never occurred in private. I expected to return to my seat as she took the podium, but she gestured for me to remain on stage. Confused but compliant, I stood slightly to the side as she began her address. Thank you all for being here tonight. She began, her voice warm and charismatic, the voice she used for public occasions. Your generosity makes our work possible, and for that I am profoundly grateful. She spoke for several minutes about the Foundation's mission and achievements, repeating much of what I had already said, but taking credit as if these were all her own accomplishments. Then, unexpectedly, she turned toward me. I want to thank my daughter Paige for that lovely introduction, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's not easy living in the shadow of a successful parent. Is it, dear? A murmur of uncomfortable laughter rippled through the audience. I maintained my poised expression, though I felt the first stirrings of unease. Paige has always been persistent, my mother continued, even when things don't come naturally to her. It's a quality I've always admired, that willingness to keep trying despite limited success. The audience's discomfort was now palpable. This had gone beyond the usual gentle teasing of a family member. It was veering into deliberate humiliation. I sometimes tell her she should be more assertive. My mother said, her tone light but her eyes cold. But the truth is, you're not even a doormat, are you, Paige? People actually notice when they step on those. The gasp from the audience was audible. 300 people, many of whom had known me for years, witnessed my mother's casual cruelty. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I felt the blood rush to my face, the burning humiliation that had been my constant companion since childhood. But beneath that familiar feeling was something new, a cold, clear anger that crystallized every thought. I maintained my frozen smile as my mother continued her speech as if nothing unusual had happened. She had said what she meant to say, that I was less than nothing, not even worthy of being walked upon. And now she was moving on to discuss the foundation's goals for the coming year. From the corner of my eye, I could see Ryan and Laura at their table. Laura's hand was over her mouth in shock, while Ryan stared at his plate, unwilling to meet anyone's gaze. My father, seated at the same table, looked uncomfortable but unsurprised. He had witnessed this dynamic for decades and had never intervened. A waiter standing near the stage caught my eye and gave me a small, sympathetic squeeze on the shoulder as I finally moved to exit the stage. It was a tiny gesture of humanity in an inhumane moment, and I felt pathetically grateful for it. As I made my way back to my table, I saw pity in the eyes of the guests I passed. Some looked away in embarrassment, while others offered small smiles of support. From across the room, I saw Laura mouth the words, "I'm so sorry." I slid into my seat, my mind racing. For 35 years, I had accepted this treatment. I had funded my mother's charity, supported her work, sought her approval in 1,000 different ways. And in return, she had publicly branded me as less than nothing. In that moment, I knew with absolute clarity that nothing would ever change unless I changed it. My mother would never see my worth, no matter what I achieved or how much I gave. The revelation was simultaneously devastating and liberating. As Diana Wilson continued speaking on stage, outlining plans that would require millions of dollars, my millions of dollars, to implement, I made a decision. It was time to stop enabling the person who had spent a lifetime tearing me down. As my mother continued her speech, I quietly excused myself from the table, ignoring the curious glances from those seated with me. In the elegant hallway outside the ballroom, I found Jessica waiting. She had attended the gala at my insistence, though she had no official role there. One look at my face told her everything. "I heard," she said simply. "Everyone heard." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment, as emotions threatened to overwhelm me. When I finally found my voice, it was surprisingly steady. "I need the portfolio. All of it." Jessica didn't hesitate. She had prepared for this possibility, though neither of us had expected it to happen so publicly or dramatically. From her clutch bag, she produced a slim tablet and handed it to me. "Everything's there. The building, deeds, the donation records, the shell companies, the pending transfers. All of it," she said. "What are you going to do?" I took the tablet with steady hands. What I should have done years ago. In the quiet of the coat check room, I reviewed the documents Jessica had prepared. The evidence of my financial support for Freedom Builders was comprehensive and undeniable. Through various channels I had provided, the building that housed their headquarters valued at $12 million, annual operating grants totaling approximately $4 million, funding for their scholarship program another $2 million annually, the pending purchase of property for their newest center $7 million, a line of credit for emergency expenses currently drawn to $3 million. All told, without my support, Freedom Builders would collapse within weeks. The realization gave me no pleasure, but it did give me power. The power to finally break free from a toxic dynamic that had defined my life for too long. I made 3 phone calls. 1. to my lawyer instructing him to freeze all transfers to entities associated with Freedom Builders 2, to my bank canceling the pending property purchase for the new center. 3. To my financial team directing them to begin the process of separating my assets from the foundation. Each call was brief and professional. I didn't explain the personal reasons behind my decisions. I didn't need to. These were my assets accumulated through my own hard work and business acumen, and I had every right to direct them as I saw fit. When I returned to the ballroom, my mother was finishing her speech to enthusiastic applause. She looked triumphant, unaware that the financial ground beneath her charitable empire had just shifted seismically. I resumed my seat with a new sense of calm, a clarity that felt almost like an out-of-body experience. The next portion of the evening was the charity auction, a staple of these events. Luxury items and experiences were offered to the highest bidder, with all proceeds going to the foundation. My mother took great pride in this portion of the gala, as it showcased both the generosity of her wealthy friends and her own influence in securing desirable auction items. When the bidding began for a week at a private villa in Tuscany, I raised my paddle, outbidding everyone, including my mother, who always made a show of bidding on certain items. When the auctioneer called out, "Sold to Ms. Paige Wilson for $30,000, I simply smiled and made no move to complete the paperwork. I did the same for the next item, a rare wine collection, and the next, a custom piece of jewelry. Each time I outbid everyone, including my mother. And each time I made no move to finalize the purchase. Confusion began to ripple through the event staff. The auction coordinator approached my table. "Ms. Wilson, we need to process your winning bids," she whispered urgently. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I replied calmly. "I won't be completing those purchases." Her eyes widened. "But the foundation is counting on that revenue." "Yes, I imagine they are," I said, my voice still calm. "Just as they've been counting on my anonymous donations for years. You might want to speak with the financial director. I believe they're experiencing some unexpected cash flow issues tonight." The coordinator hurried away, clearly confused and concerned. Across the room, I could see my mother engaged in an intense conversation with the foundation's financial director, who had been summoned from the back office. Their expressions grew increasingly alarmed as the conversation continued. As the auction concluded and dinner was served, staff members moved discreetly through the room, whispering urgently to one another. The atmosphere of celebration had shifted to one of confusion and concern, though most guests remained unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes. I ate my meal slowly, tasting nothing, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. It came sooner than expected. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, my mother made her way through the now half-empty ballroom, her face a mask of controlled fury. She found me at my table where I was calmly sipping a glass of water, having declined the wine served with dinner. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Now." I nodded and followed her to a small anteroom off the main ballroom. The space was elegantly appointed with antique furniture and oil paintings, a quiet retreat from the larger event. As soon as the door closed behind us, my mother turned on me. "What have you done?" she demanded. "The financial director tells me our accounts are frozen pending transfers have been canceled, and the property purchase for the Chicago Center has fallen through. He said it all happened within the last hour." I met her gaze steadily. "I withdrew my support," I said simply. "Your support?" she scoffed. "What are you talking about? You've made a few modest donations over the years, nothing that would cause this kind of disruption." "Not under my own name," I agreed, "but through Emerald Ventures, Phoenix Holdings, and the Campbell Foundation. Those are all me, Mother. Every anonymous major donation for the past 7 years has come from me." The color drained from her face. "That's not possible." I removed the tablet from my clutch and handed it to her. "See for yourself. The building you're so proud of, I bought it 4 years ago, when your lease was about to expire, and I've been letting the foundation use it for $1 a year. The scholarship program that sent 57 women to college. That's me. The emergency fund that kept you afloat during the pandemic. Also me." She stared at the screen, scrolling through document after document, her hands beginning to shake. "Why?" she finally whispered. Why would you do this and not tell me? Would it have mattered? I asked. Would knowing that your disappointing daughter was the one keeping your foundation afloat have changed how you treated me? Or would you have just found new ways to make me feel worthless while taking my money? Before she could respond, the door opened and my father entered, followed closely by Ryan. Both men looked confused and concerned. Diana, what's going on? My father asked. The staff is saying there's some kind of financial crisis. Ask your daughter, my mother said, her voice bitter as she thrust the tablet toward him. Apparently, she's been playing games with the foundation's finances. My father took the tablet and began reviewing the documents, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. Ryan looked over his shoulder, his eyes widening as he grasped the situation. This can't be right, my father muttered. Paige, you're behind Emerald Ventures and Phoenix Holdings. That's millions of dollars. 37 million to be exact, I confirmed. Over the past 7 years, that's what I've contributed to Freedom Builders anonymously, while Mother continued to treat me like I was nothing. Ryan looked up from the tablet, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. Why didn't you tell us? Would it have changed anything? I asked again. Would Mother have suddenly respected me if she knew I was the one funding her precious foundation? Or would she have just found a way to take credit for my success while continuing to belittle me? This is absurd, my mother interrupted, having recovered some of her composure. You can't just pull funding like this. We have commitments programs, women who depend on us. I'm well aware of that, I replied, and I have no intention of hurting the women you serve. But I am done enabling your toxic behavior, Mother. Done pretending that your approval matters more than my self-respect. I turned to face all three of them. My mother, my father, my brother. The family that had never truly seen me. For 35 years, I have tried to earn your love and respect. I've changed how I dress, how I speak, what I study, where I live, all to try to be the daughter you wanted. And none of it was ever enough. My voice remained steady, though emotion threatened to overwhelm me. Tonight, in front of 300 people, you made it crystal clear what you really think of me. You're not even a doormat, you said. People actually notice when they step on those. Do you have any idea how deeply those words cut? Do you even care? My mother's face hardened. You're being overly sensitive. It was just a joke. No, I said firmly. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth as you see it, and now you're facing the consequences of treating me, as if I don't matter. My father finally found his voice. Paige, surely we can discuss this rationally. The foundation does important work. You can't just pull the plug because your feelings were hurt. I turned to him, years of suppressed anger finally surfacing. My feelings were hurt. Is that what you think this is about? For 35 years, you've stood by and watched her systematically tear me down. You've never once defended me. Your comfort was always more important than my pain. And now you want to talk rationally. Ryan stepped forward. Paige, what do you want? What would it take to resolve this? It was the first practical question anyone had asked, and it took me a moment to formulate my answer. 2 things. First, a public apology from Mother, as public as her insult was. Second, she steps down from leadership of the foundation effective immediately. That's outrageous, my mother exclaimed. Freedom Builders is my life's work. You can't just take it away from me. It's not your life's work, I corrected her. It's been my life's work too, financing it all these years. And I'm not taking it away. I'm giving you a choice. Apologize and step aside or watch it collapse. This is blackmail, she hissed. No, Mother. This is a boundary, something I should have established long ago. My father looked between us, clearly torn. For perhaps the first time in his life, he couldn't avoid taking a side. Diana, he said slowly, I think you need to consider Paige's terms. My mother's head snapped toward him, her expression incredulous. You're taking her side after everything I've done for this family. I'm not taking sides, he insisted, though we all knew that was exactly what he was doing. I'm being practical. If what Paige is saying is true, and these documents suggest it is, then the foundation can't survive without her support. You need to think about all the women who depend on Freedom Builders. My mother's face contorted with rage. "If you do this," she said to me, her voice shaking, "if you humiliate me this way, you are no longer my daughter. Do you understand? You will be dead to me." I had expected this threat, had feared it for most of my life, but in this moment it held no power over me. "I've been dead to you for years," I replied quietly. "The only difference now is that I'm finally standing up for myself." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving my stunned family behind. In the main ballroom, Jessica was waiting, car keys in hand and a supportive smile on her face. "Ready to go?" she asked. I nodded, suddenly exhausted, but lighter than I had felt in years. "More than ready." As we walked through the now empty ballroom, I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I was moving forward on my own terms, unburdened by the weight of seeking approval from someone who would never give it. The days following the gala were a whirlwind of emotions and practical challenges. News of Freedom Builders' sudden financial troubles spread quickly through Boston's philanthropic community. Rumors abounded: mismanagement, fraud, embezzlement. But the truth remained known only to a handful of people. I returned to New York the morning after the gala, needing distance from Boston and time to process what I had done. Jessica came with me, working remotely to help manage the fallout. We spent hours in my penthouse apartment reviewing legal documents, speaking with my financial team, and planning next steps. The emotional impact hit me in waves. Moments of empowerment and liberation would suddenly give way to grief and doubt. Had I gone too far? Was I punishing vulnerable women to satisfy my own need for justice? Would I regret burning this bridge with my family? "You did the right thing," Jessica reassured me during one particularly difficult moment. "What your mother did was cruel and deliberate, and you're not abandoning the women who need help. You're just changing how that help is delivered." She was right. Even as I withdrew support from Freedom Builders, I was already working on establishing my own foundation, one that would carry on the best aspects of my mother's work, while eliminating the toxic leadership and nepotism that had characterized it. 3 days after the gala, the first tangible consequences of my actions became apparent. Freedom Builders announced layoffs, 20% of their staff, primarily from administrative roles. The press release cited unexpected financial challenges and promised that core services would continue uninterrupted, though anyone with financial literacy could see this was just the beginning. My father called that evening, his voice weary. "Your mother is devastated, Paige. The foundation is falling apart around her." "Has she considered my terms?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He sighed. "You know your mother. She's resistant to the idea of stepping down, but perhaps a compromise could be reached. A less public apology, maybe a gradual transition of leadership." "No," I said firmly. "This isn't a negotiation. My terms are clear." "Then I don't know what to tell you. She's prepared to let the foundation collapse rather than admit she was wrong." After we hung up, I sat in my living room watching the lights of New York City twinkle beyond my windows. My mother's pride was more important to her than the women her foundation served. It was a painful realization, but not a surprising one. A week after the gala, Ryan reached out. Unlike our father, he came to New York to see me in person. We met at a quiet restaurant near my apartment, the kind of place where privacy was guaranteed and conversations couldn't be overheard. "You look different," he said as we sat down. "More, I don't know, present." I smiled slightly. "I feel different. Lighter, maybe." He nodded, studying me with new eyes. "I had no idea, Paige, about the money, about how bad things were between you and Mom. I mean, I knew she was hard on you, but I didn't realize how cruel she could be," I finished for him, "or how complicit you were in allowing it." He winced. "That's fair. I was the golden child, and I never questioned why. It was easier to accept her favor than to examine the cost." His honesty surprised me. Ryan and I had never been close, our relationship defined more by competition than connection. But here he was making an effort I hadn't expected. "The foundation is in serious trouble," he continued. "They've had to cancel the Chicago expansion, and there's talk of closing 2 existing centers. Mom is not handling it well. And Dad," Ryan ran a hand through his hair, "he's caught in the middle as always. But something's changed. He's standing up to her in ways I've never seen before. It's like your confrontation opened a door for him, too. We talked for hours that night, really talked perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. Ryan shared his own complicated feelings about our mother. The pressure to be perfect, the fear of disappointing her, the golden cage of her approval. I shared my journey of trying to earn her love while building my own success. "I want to be a better brother to you," he said as we were leaving. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I want to try." I hugged him, this man who was my blood, but had been a stranger in so many ways. "I'd like that," I said softly. 2 weeks after the gala, I launched Wilson Empowerment Fund, a new foundation with a mission similar to Freedom Builders, but with a structure designed for maximum transparency and effectiveness. I hired several key staff members who had been laid off from Freedom Builders people, who had been doing excellent work despite the dysfunctional leadership. The media picked up the story quickly. Daughter of prominent philanthropist starts competing foundation after mysterious falling out. I declined interviews, focusing instead on ensuring that the women who had been served by Freedom Builders would have a smooth transition to our programs. A month after the gala, my mother finally reached out, not with an apology, but with a request to meet. I agreed, suggesting a public cafe rather than either of our homes. Some boundaries were still necessary. She looked older when she arrived, the stress of recent weeks evident in the new lines around her eyes and mouth. Gone was the impeccably polished socialite. In her place was a woman who seemed diminished somehow, her designer outfit hanging a bit too loosely on her frame. "You've destroyed everything I built," she said without preamble as she sat down across from me. "No, mother," I replied calmly. "You did that when you chose your pride over the women you claim to serve." She flinched slightly at my directness. "I need your help, Paige. The foundation is on the verge of collapse. We've had to close 3 centers already, and without an immediate influx of funds, we'll have to shut down completely within weeks." "My terms haven't changed," I said. "A public apology and your resignation from leadership. And if I refuse, then Freedom Builders will close and Wilson Empowerment Fund will continue the work with better leadership and more sustainable funding." She stared at me, searching for the compliant daughter she had always known. Instead, she found a woman who had finally embraced her own worth. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said softly. "I'm the woman you helped create," I replied. "Every criticism, every dismissal, every public humiliation. They all taught me something valuable. They taught me what I'm not willing to accept anymore." As our meeting ended without resolution, I realized that my mother might never change, might never be capable of the self-reflection necessary to repair our relationship. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. My worth was no longer dependent on her recognition of it. 1 year later, Wilson Empowerment Fund was thriving. We had opened centers in 5 cities, including the Chicago location, that Freedom Builders had been forced to abandon. Our programs had a 92% success rate in helping women achieve independence and stability, and I was finally leading with my own vision, not hiding in the shadows of anonymous donations. Freedom Builders had closed its doors 6 months earlier, unable to recover from the financial collapse. My mother had refused to the end to meet my terms, choosing to let her foundation fail rather than acknowledge her wrongdoing. It was a painful lesson in how pride can destroy what love might have built. My father had surprised everyone by filing for divorce after 40 years of marriage. "I should have stood up for you long ago," he told me during one of our now regular lunch meetings. "I can't change the past, but I can choose a different future." Ryan and I had developed a genuine friendship, discovering common interests and values that had been obscured by our dysfunctional family dynamics. His wife Laura had become one of my closest confidants, a sister in all but blood. As for my mother, we remained estranged. Sometimes I saw her name in society pages, attending events with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness for what might have been if she had been capable of love, without conditions of respect, without control. But those moments became less frequent as I built a life filled with authentic connections and meaningful work. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. that sometimes the family we create for ourselves is more nurturing than the one we're born into. At the first annual gala for Wilson Empowerment Fund, I stood on stage before an audience of supporters and shared my vision for helping women rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. As I spoke, I caught Jessica's eye in the front row. She smiled and gave me a subtle thumbs up, a reminder of how far I had come. The journey to empowerment often begins with a single moment of clarity, I told the audience, a moment when you realize that you deserve better than what you've been accepting. For some of the women we serve, that moment comes when they leave an abusive relationship. For others, when they complete their first college course or receive their first paycheck in a job they love. I paused thinking of my own moment of clarity on that stage a year ago. For me, it came when I finally understood that I didn't need to earn love or respect by diminishing myself, that I could stand tall in my own truth and find people who would value me for exactly who I am. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with a toxic family member? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And if this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve respect. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept mistreatment. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to honor your own worth always.